We press go live. So a few seconds left and we're gonna be there. So Nina, I will introduce yourself and you will introduce me, Mimi, the usual drink. Okay. Just a few seconds and we are there. Energy. Right. Okay, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday. We are calling from sunny Dubai. I'm very excited today. I hope everyone can feel my and our energy actually through the screen because you are in for a treat. So welcome to our Thriving Together series. Today we are talking about empathy in action, building stronger connections for personal well-being. We are building on the discussion from last week and from previous weeks, and we have touched on topics of mental agility and how we can unlock wellness and collective well-being with this. So my name is Magda Snowden. I am an international nurse leader, a caregiver. I am also a team transformation coach, mentally agile leadership facilitator, mental health first aider, author, but most importantly, I am a human that is fascinated with maximizing human potential. And what I have been doing for the past few years is trying to bridge the gap between the mental agility and the strategic acumen in leadership. I see a huge potential in there for mental agility skills, emotional intelligence, including empathy. If we combine the whole package, then this is really like a win-win situation for everyone, for the employees, for organizations, for community out there, and talking sustainability language and all this. So today I am here with my co-host. Luckily, I have a partner in crime, my soul sister and a fellow Nina. So Nina, please.
Hi, everyone. Hello. I am so lucky actually to be in this session today, and I'm so excited. I think Tuesdays are going to be my new favorite days because of these amazing sessions. I am Nina. I am a mom of a 6-year-old that keeps me on my feet, and I'm a deputy chief nurse, and I'm a mental health first aider as well. I am very passionate about nursing, and I'm a cheerleader about the profession. I want to be able to influence and aim and support to give to the nurses and people within my organization or in different professions to help them to see their potential. I have a great conviction that mental health is of utmost importance, and it is a precursor to physical health and the total well-being. And I am excited to introduce our lovely guest today, Mimi. To you, Mimi.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And you two are like infectiously enthusiastic. Because whilst Magda said we're beaming to you from Dubai, I'm actually in Malaysia, so I'm adding a little bit of Asia to the mix, and it's really late here, and I don't feel remotely tired listening to these two ladies. I feel like I can stay up all night. So thank you so much for having me and bringing all that energy to your specialism and to mine as well this evening. So for anyone who doesn't know me, my name's Mimi, and I specialize in creating empathy in our world. I do a huge amount of work in the corporate world and more in all areas of life, including healthcare and education. And that was really a journey for me to realize that whilst we do spend 5/7 of our lives at work, and so working with the corporate world and leadership is incredibly important, if we don't focus on, well, the people that are helping us live through these times and also the educators in the school system, we're not creating a sustainable, empathetic society for the future. So I'm talking more and more about healthcare. In fact, I don't even think you two ladies know, but my next book is significantly about healthcare. And honestly, audience, we didn't talk about this offline. So it's perfect timing. And I'm really, really happy to be here.
Wow, amazing, because I believe that people connect for a reason. So definitely our trio came for this project for a reason. And these lives actually initially were aimed to find or discuss solutions for stress and burnout in healthcare. But when the vision started evolving, I started thinking that actually every single individual that encounters healthcare is going to benefit when healthcare workers have better levels of well-being, organizational, psychological safety, and all these topics. So it is going to be beneficial for everyone out there. And we have been receiving quite a lot of feedback after the sessions that, yes, these conversations are needed. I've received messages from nurses that are saying that the nurses are actually doing the nurse training. So they are saying that they will be doing trainings, extra trainings from their own pockets in mental agility to have these kind of skills to equip them better when they finish the training. So definitely there is a need for this kind of conversation, but also I feel there is a need for a massive shift in mindset on a systemic level. Because if we want to instill empathy, emotional intelligence, mental agility, in organizations, in leadership trainings, then we need to start at a systemic level. Because like one-off workshop or awareness session doesn't really produce the result that we are looking for.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let us start actually. The aim of these sessions also, we have a structure. I promise people that we will discuss and share perhaps personal examples or examples of good practice that people will be able to apply in their life. Some micro tips, scalable solutions, something that is already producing good results perhaps in other countries that can be also applicable in where we are currently now. So definitely Mimi is our expert in here, because by watching your content, I have learned so much. And I love data, I love, reports, statistics, or if you ask me, for evidence like burnout rates, emotional intelligence, recession from the state of heart report and all this, I have all the technical, let's say, information in there. So I want to learn from you, Mimi. First of all, what is your definition of empathy? And then we can go from there.
We're gonna take it from there. Before I start talking, in empathy for the audience, I can see that my camera is freezing. I have no idea why, but I am here. So if it freezes on all random facial expressions, you're just gonna have to be patient and empathetic with me. I am definitely here. So my definition of empathy is, at its simplest, Magda, is it's about perspective taking. There are, as you just said, you love data, you love definitions. If you Google all of the types of empathy, you will find multiple types of empathy that have been defined, particularly in the scientific worlds. But for me, I only ever focus on the real core simplicity of what empathy is, which is the ability to understand somebody else's perspective. Absolutely. And the reason I do that is because, as you both know, we have too little empathy already. So quite frankly, we're not ready as a planet to start teaching multiple types of empathy when we haven't got the basics down, right? So I really explain to people that empathy is fundamentally about perspective taking. It is about standing in the shoes of a patient, of somebody that's in your clinic, of somebody that you're working with, and saying, how do they see this same experience? How are they seeing this environment? Even if you're a receptionist at a doctor's surgery, right, when people are coming in and they're unwell, what is that environment to them? What do they see? What do they hear? Why are they nervous? What might make them on edge, right? Fundamentally, empathy is humanity's data set. It's being able to understand how other people experience the environment that you're in and around you.
Beautiful. Yeah. I think we can relate a lot, Nina, right? When you first enter healthcare facility, what is your initial feeling? Are people looking at you, or are they looking down at a piece of paper?
Exactly. So thank you, Mimi, because I think starting from the basics is what helps us to actually have a simple understanding of empathy. And I think this word is a huge word that is so underrated and so underestimated. And to be honest, in healthcare more than ever, because I think what happens is, because we get used to our workflow with our patients and so on, we become a bit desensitized with with time, and we forget to feel, because we take the individual or whoever as, okay, this is another case, we've seen that before, we do this and that and so on, and we forget to actually look at the human, as you said, Magda, and actually address that unique needs, that unique goals, that unique perspective that person or patient will need.
Mm. And you know, Nina, that the data, just to jump in there, it shows that as well, right? It shows that as nurses and doctors go through their careers, their empathy levels on the whole does decrease for many reasons, but one of them is what you're saying. And actually, in parallel to any leadership role, it's very similar. The more senior we get statistically in any workplace, the less empathy we show. And you're absolutely right that habit or experience is one of the reasons around that, because we've seen this before, you know. So even for me as a leader, if someone comes into my office and says, Mimi, can I talk to you? The client has said this and the timeline has done this and the budget. The reality is I've heard probably that exact story many, many times before. It would be very easy for me to just jump in and say, Sarah, why don't we solve it like this? Okay. But that's not the point. Sarah doesn't need me to solve it for her, right? She needs me to hear, to listen to her experience of that current problem. So the example you gave there is just a perfect example, because it is so backed up by data that shows nursing, medical or otherwise, the busier we are, the higher stress we have, and the more experience we have, the less good we are at listening to people in that moment.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. And I think we've mentioned this on our previous session, that human connection is number one. So you acknowledge the human in front of you.
Yes.
How do you acknowledge the human in front of you if you don't acknowledge yourself? So Nina, as you said, that we get desensitized, so we might act in robotic ways, right? It's an automatic 1, 2, 3 task oriented, instead of just stopping and acknowledging, how do I feel in this situation? If I am able to acknowledge myself, I think this is the way forward to acknowledge the person that is standing in front of me, whether it's my or whether it is the patient.
Yeah,
very true.
Yeah.
And as actually I said at the beginning that we always try to give micro tips in here and some scalable solutions. So there is this beautiful Ubuntu concept. They have the concept of conscious greeting, and we have discussed a little bit about consciousness before we started the live discussion. That instead of saying just how are you, and just progressing to the business part, not acknowledging actually the person's feeling, or what, even not waiting for the reply for the how are you that you have asked. In the South African concept, they, instead of how are you, they said I see you. And this is so powerful when you say I see you, which means you really acknowledge the human in front. You really see that person. So I think it's also in the wordings of this sentence, there is something there. So yeah, human connection, and let's acknowledge our own humanity, so we can also see the human in others.
Yeah, and Magda, again, we didn't talk about this off air, but I don't think you've read my book, but my book has an entire chapter about Ubuntu. So if you needed any more connection between us in this call, it is so rare for someone to know what you just said, right? Because Ubuntu is such a localized South African reality. It's a Zulu greeting. It's really not well known at all. And when my book first came out, it was funny. The media loved that, right? Every time I was interviewing, they were like, what is this thing you're talking about, Ubuntu? But it is so rare now for anybody to mention it. And you just brought it up totally naturally. So I'm really excited that you said that.
Wow, yeah. I was introduced to this concept by my coaching mentor. So yeah, I've read the whole book, and there is also Ubuntu coaching. And there is a lot of lessons actually that we could learn from Ubuntu culture about leadership and about addressing the other person.
Yeah, fantastic.
Okay, so now we know what is empathy. It's a skill set. It's a very simple explanation. It's a skill set, and same like with every skill, we can learn it, we can master it, and we can maintain it. And what comes to mind for me immediately, and this is something that I advocate for, is not to call this type of skills soft skills. We know that with soft skills, we think this is the fluffy stuff, and there is no so much emphasis from leaders, from organizations, even from individuals. Because I remember myself when I was doing my nurse training in the UK, I did my MBA here in the UAE. I did not recall sessions that were solely oriented how to deal with stress, how to navigate emotions, how this particular skill set will impact my leadership in future.
I hear that all the time. Again, particularly in your profession. And people say nobody ever taught us this, Mimi. It's slightly better in the USA. I'm not saying training is better in the USA, but the focus on areas such as empathy and engagement in your role, that's what I've learned through the work I do, right? Every time I work with healthcare organizations in the US, they are a little bit ahead. They do know, they often have been on empathy training courses or courses in kind of patient communication and stress, handling grief, handling the delivery of bad news, all those types of things. But again, Magda, when I work with people in Europe, like you said, they've often never been told how to do that. And as the world becomes more and more stressful all the time, these are skill sets that, certainly we need, and that our children need as well. We need to teach the next generation. Nina, my daughter's also 6. And, I look at what she is capable of doing. And these are skill sets we have to teach them. So yeah, it's drastically missing in the system, Magda. And I was at dinner just very recently with 2 NHS, so British government doctors. And they were explaining to me that, with the system that's in place in the UK, they're only allowed between 9 and 10 minutes per patient. Yeah. They're both GPs. And that means that in a day, one working day, they see between 35 and 40 patients for an average of 9 minutes. Yeah. Now, how any doctor builds a relationship or any form of trust or connection, as well as diagnosing a problem in under 9 minutes, is beyond me. But it is the way that our healthcare systems are going. And I shared some data just a couple of weeks ago that showed in some countries that goes down as low as 48 seconds. So doctors are seeing patients, and that was in Africa, but in under 1 minute. So yeah, there's definitely a drastic need out there to look at the value of connection, of understanding, of listening to people as part of healing, actually.
Absolutely. And guys, I think also learning empathy, as you guys are mentioning, is very important. And I think it should be embedded in the organization strategy as part of the onboarding, the orientation, and all that. And it should be as important as having a competency in actually doing medical and practical and nursing stuff, as important as being empathetic. Because studies show that a lot of patients will stay with a physician or a nurse because they felt that trust, they felt that connection, they felt that, they're being addressed as an individual to someone who is maybe highly and clinically an expert, but who is just not having the right, skills to actually take care of the patient accordingly. So definitely, and we should just keep making huge noise on empathy and how we can bring it into the healthcare. And I think, Magda, one of the things you were saying is that to make it trendy, trend empathy a trend. I think it's important that we should do that.
Yeah, I wish we can, and hopefully we can. And what's really important to add there, Nina, is that the data Magda was saying earlier, let's have some data here, but the data shows significant health improvement when there is empathy present. So yes, there is an experiential improvement, like you were just saying, patients will stay with their doctor or healthcare provider, but they will also stay on track in their healing, which means that they're taking the right drugs for a longer period of time and therefore are surviving and healing better. But there's also unbelievable data that shows that when nurses and doctors show empathy in that environment, pain indicators decrease. So we are able to actually reduce physiological pain by listening to our patients. And that data then spreads all the way to things like blood glucose levels, where there is now research out of the US that shows that there's impact on blood glucose levels, there's impacts on a whole range of diseases like diabetes type 2, cardiovascular disease, even the recovery from cancer. So the data is huge, right? Which is why I'm writing a book on it, to tell people, yes, it's wonderful. It is wonderful because we're humans and we need to connect. But beyond that, we are going to heal people and we are going to cost the system less.
Wow.
Because people will be better and will heal better. And repeat visits also go down. So there was some research I read just this week that was done in ER, so in the emergency room in the USA. And they did empathic listening. So basically, I know that sounds very wishy-washy, but fundamentally, they just got healthcare providers that were on the administration team to listen for 15 minutes to people that came on the back of drunk driving incidents. Wow. So people that had caused or had been part of causing a drunk driving incident that came into the emergency room. And they were giving them 15 minutes to listen to them, to listen basically to what happened, to their side of the story, to their experience of what happened that night. And what they found was a 48% decline in repeat visits to the ER against people that hadn't gone through that process.
Wow.
So they were able to significantly change behavior as well, which again went on to save that hospital in question. I think they said 13 million or something in savings of people they didn't have to, administer into the hospital. So there is a really strong business case, a really strong medical case, and a really strong emotional and human case for having that connection. Absolutely. And the name of my book is Softening the Edge. Thanks, Laura.
Amazing.
It's on Amazon. You can find it everywhere.
Gonna be reading. Actually, there is another example that I've also read from some research that even if there is a mistake or an incident that happens during hospital stay with the patients, they are most likely to continue with the same nurse or physician if there is a level of trust and empathy built in this reaction.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is amazing. So, empathy heals people. This is what we just said, directly and indirectly, right? And again, we have research and we have data to show. So actually, we've discussed what is empathy and what it can do, let's say, in a healthcare professional and patient relation. I also want for our attendees, for our viewers to understand how we ended up in this situation. So what is the science behind the current situation? And we know pandemic was there, right? For 2 years, we had really hard time. And then there was a research done about how emotional intelligence levels and empathy levels have declined. So I have some key findings here from the State of Heart report, and this is 2023 data. Global emotional intelligence scores declined sharply during the pandemic. We all know that. From 2018 to 2022, they declined on every emotional intelligence competency. And empathy is one of the emotional intelligence competencies. The second finding says that the world is facing a human energy crisis at home and at work. Well-being scores continue to decline. We have rate of burnout. We have the Cigna report. If we want to look at reports that are applicable to the local market in the UAE, we have the Cigna report. We have the Gallup state at work, and we have many, reference points. Social isolation and emotional detachment are at all-time highs. And these issues are especially concerning for the younger generations. And this is something that I was actually baffling to understand. I did not quite know how to connect how the younger generation is suffering. And I have a niece, her name is Anna, she's 16 years old. And I've been having a lot of conversations with her recently. And I can definitely say that her level of emotional intelligence is something that I wish I had when I was her age. The way she expresses herself, and she can say clearly, I don't like, this kind of behavior, this is upsetting me, and so on. So I can definitely see how there can be a disconnect especially in a workplace when we have 5 generations now, right? Meeting in one workplace. So how do the most senior communicate with the most junior?
It's a big question. I think, you know, that report you were stating there, Magda, is a really phenomenal one, and there are many more supporting that exact data. We absolutely have a crisis. In fact, according to Gallup, which is a large research business out of the USA, we have an $8.8 trillion crisis. And that $8.8 trillion marks the lack of productivity or the loss due to low productivity of disengaged people, right? Presenteeism, people who are not well or not enjoying or not engaged in the workplace. So the problem, as you said, is huge. In terms of how did we get here, that was your original question. I mean, there are many sort of parts of that. What we know is that we have a 48% decline in our empathy levels over the last 3 decades. When you understand that we've touched on today that empathy is an evolutionary skill set, it quite literally keeps us alive as a human race, you start to unpack the size, the scale of that lack of connectivity, which is fundamentally what an empathy deficit is. So an empathy deficit is the growing gap between people in understanding. It causes segregation, isolation, loneliness. When empathy is low, the isms, racism, ageism, sexism, ableism, anyism, goes up, right? So the less we understand each other, the bigger those gaps go. And of course, over those 3 decades, not only does the data show that, but we have various other social realities that have impacted that. So the rise in urbanization is one of them, you know, people leaving their communities and homes and villages, whether that's literal or figurative, that they grew up in to move into cities. Globalization, you know, I think both of you are in Dubai, or at least Magda, I know you're definitely in Dubai. You are surrounded by 197 other nationalities every day of the week. And there is something wonderful in that. But at the same time, it causes lots of change in our social structures, right? We are, what I always say, you know, you are surrounded by people, but you are alone because people don't understand you, you know? So globalization, technology, and I'm a huge fan of what technology can do for empathy. So this is not a bashing of technology. I don't think that technology ruined empathy forever. However, when we spend so much time either on our phones, on our devices, or using those devices to escape the loneliness, the anxiety that is out there in society. So, you know, you'll often hear of people that say, well, I just spent all weekend watching Netflix because they were escaping whatever's outside the door, right? The rest of life. So the rise in technology definitely does disconnect us. And as you said, first time in history, we have 4 generations in our workplace. So between the person at the top who might be in some parts of South Asia, where I work a lot, they might be in their 80s or maybe even 90s, still in the business. And then you have people at the bottom who are 17. Now, a 17-year-old and a 70-year-old, they don't even speak the same language, let alone tweet the same language, right? So there's huge, huge gaps. So these gaps continue to propagate, to increase this empathy deficit. But if I had to say that there's one cause, when you ask the question, what is the cause of the crisis? The cause is loneliness. So we have 52% of us statistically are lonely. And according to the Surgeon General in the USA, loneliness is as dangerous as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Our loneliness is killing us. So if we really had to look at the core of the problem, that disconnection is a huge fundamental issue in the workplace, but probably more predominantly in real life. And that is impacting 400 million people with depression, highest burden on our healthcare system worldwide, all the way to suicide rates, which we know in many countries, the second biggest killer of our youth is taking their own lives. So when we get to a point when our children don't want to stay on the planet with us, we probably need an intervention.
That's scary. That's scary. And that's absolutely alarming, Mary, when these statistics start showing up. I think it's scary that we have reached a point as humans where loneliness has become a measure that shows how long you can live. And the fact that we have all what it takes to actually make a difference and prevent that from happening and heal people is also alarming. Like, what are we doing as humans to have these types of things coming up, you know? And I think one of the things that is important is that as leaders from healthcare perspective, we have to have the willingness to actually show that we genuinely and authentically care about the individual. So when people come to us and want to express to us about things that's going on in their life or in their work and so on, we have to create the time. We have to, because at the end of the day, taking care of that person will take care of the people, which will take care of your business. And it becomes like a cyclical thing for the, you know, and for the whole universe at the end of the day. So it's scary and alarming, and I think it's important that these things become more widely known and there's more interventions to actually try to limit that.
Mm.
Mm. So empathy is the connectivity with other human, and the lack of it causes loneliness. And as we said, loneliness is not only on the emotional level, because actually it can have really harmful effects on the physical level. As human beings, we are the whole being, right? Mind, body, spirit is never the one component. If one component is suffering, then the whole being is suffering.
And the data shows on that, Magda, that lonely people, and we're talking about chronically lonely, so people that are lonely for a long time, again, statistically will live 8 years less.
Yes.
So nearly a decade, you're losing nearly a decade of your life by not having connectivity, not having empathy and connection with others.
Human connection, right. Okay, so empathy as a skill set in leadership. How do we talk to our current leaders? What language do we need to use for these people? Actually, it's everyone, right? I'm a leader, Nina is a leader, and I'm not blaming, shaming, or putting labels or anyone, because I know how I grew my leadership skill set. I was not always the most empathetic one, okay? I did not have time, simply. When I'm running at 200% 24/7, empathy is not my priority. Let's put it straight. That's probably 10 years ago. Then obviously I needed to come across leaders who probably influenced me in the right way, because I saw those who were 200%, and then I saw those who always had time for me. Doesn't matter how busy the unit was. When I went to Amanda's office, she was always, you know, acknowledging me. How are you, Magda? There was never a rush. I could explain myself and I could get answer or maybe some reassurance that I was coming for. So if we are now in the AI-driven reality, technology, distraction, sustainability, we need to innovate, we need to think outside the box. We need.
Yeah.
How do we talk to leaders in organizations so they can understand our message that empathy should be prioritized?
Look, I think there's a couple of answers to that. The first is that lots of the bits of data that I've shared top line with you tonight is the data that makes a change. So first of all, on a social human level, we're talking about saving people's lives. But of course, in the hospital system, if that leadership is indeed anywhere in healthcare, pharma, anywhere, we're talking about how that impacts their patients and their clients. So again, back to that case in America, when they were using the empathy in their admissions department, they were saving $11 or $12 million. So there is a price tag to it. There is, in many cases, a really easy case to prove that. Beyond that, there is endless data, actually, which is great for me in the work that I do to prove the impact of empathy. We are talking about putting people beyond profit, not instead of. I say this to my audiences all the time. You are allowed to make money, right? We should make money. We are in business to make money, right? So this is not about do things that cost you money or reduce your ability to earn or grow as a business. It's about sustainability of your people, but it's also about productivity of your people. The data will show us that 79% of people will stay in a job longer, so longevity in their role, but also work longer hours out of choice for an empathetic boss, right? as humans, we need, it's a human need to be seen and heard. So like your boss, you were saying, then when you walk in and they say, hi, Magda, how are you? What's the problem today? How can I help you? That acknowledgement is often enough to motivate Magda, the person in question, to go on and carry on doing that role, right? So again, the first step for me in showing leaders this, and this is what I get up to do every day, is just present the data in a way that leaders of all levels and cultures can consume. Because ladies, I can tell you that often I get on a stage and there's 1,000 men, more or less, maybe there's like 996 men in black and gray suits. And I'm in like orange or pink or something. And I know that they look at me on the stage and they think, like, who is this Caucasian woman who's standing, because most of my work is in Asia, is standing on a stage and she wants to talk about empathy. Like, I know that they're thinking that. But by the time we've got to the end of that, I have presented a case that they can't deny. Number one, because you're all humans and you all have kids, or most of you have kids or people, another generation in your family, right, that you want to survive. And excuse my camera freezing. But number two, because the data will show that this is impacting your business. This is driving your performance. The biggest issue in Asia in terms of workforce is retention. We cannot keep our people. I mean, you ask any CEO in India, they'll tell you that. Their biggest issue is retention. They cannot keep their staff. So again, you know, it's an awareness issue, but it's also just about building the argument and connecting that both to the power of the people and the power of the money, right? The dollar signs. Yeah. And there are some phenomenal leaders. Satya Nadella, he's the CEO of Microsoft. You know, he has returned $1 trillion to his shareholders, and he runs his business with empathy. There are many others, but you know, who are proving that the power of human connection is the power of success. Yeah. And to your point there, it's about acknowledgement. You don't have to act. As I always tell leaders is, I'm not asking you to do more. I'm asking you to listen more, to acknowledge more of your team.
Yes, Mimi, and I couldn't agree more, because creating an empathetic culture within the organization is very important. And to see empathy as valuable in the organization is important. And when the senior leaders, they model these behaviors, and this behavior, it permeates to the entire organization, that janitor or that nurse or that healthcare assistant sees that this person who is CEO and high level or board level is acknowledging me, is seeing me. As you said, Magda, I see you from Ubuntu. And that person knows that I'm going to give my all for this organization to contribute to the success of this organization. And 100%, I think a lot of CEOs need a real shake to see how much they can make more profit by just addressing the human, being empathetic, and building that culture within the organization.
Yeah, I can see, you know, I agree with you. That's why I invest so much in studying the data. So when will be skeptics, right? I don't believe that 100% of my audience is going to agree. But at least to have the curiosity to ask the question, to understand where we are coming from. And where I'm going with this, actually, I strongly feel that empathy is connected with curiosity. We need to ask questions, because for me, during my coaching training and the mental health advocacy, I've actually upgraded my curiosity probably to another level. Okay, my curiosity is really high. And how I understand this, that when I ask questions from the curiosity point of view, I shift judgment and I reduce the unconscious bias. And this is so strongly embedded that if you don't understand this point, then I don't think there can be any further discussion. Because something that I work with leaders on, I have a one line question. Are you leading from curiosity or are you leading from assumption? I mean, it's a very clear line. Either is this or that. And, you know, if you're leading with curiosity, I feel that empathy also is going to be at a much higher level in this equation.
Yeah, and I have a very similar sentence. I always ask people, are you listening to reply or are you listening to understand? And it's a fundamental difference, because most most of the time in our lives, in fact, even in discussions like this, right? Most of the time we are listening to reply. We are hearing someone to wait for our opportunity to speak around the boardroom table, around the kitchen table, wherever you are, right? That long lost art of really listening just to understand. And as you said there, use your curiosity, which is fundamentally the backbone of empathy, right? If you do not ask, how will you ever understand, right? So when you talk about diversity and inclusion, for example, you know, in the system, in the hospital system, so amongst your nursing staff, but do you know how your nurses want to be included? Have you asked them? And when I ask HR leaders that question, they always laugh and they go, no. And they laugh because they know I'm right, right? I say, but how do you know they want to be included like that? Or, you know, have you discussed your diverse policies with the groups of people that you consider to be diverse? And they never have, right? Because they're not using that curiosity, right? They're not using that curiosity to, as you said, overcome judgment, overcome assumption, and actually understand it. And the reality is, if you're an HR person listening, you don't have to act on every word, right? People are going to ask you for all kinds of stuff that you can't deliver on. But the act of hearing them is inclusive, it is empowering, it is engaging. So Magda, I couldn't agree more. I think curiosity is probably the currency of our times.
You know, when you're talking about the diversity and inclusion and HR practices, actually, I had a very interesting discussion recently with another coach and a university professor who said something about employee engagement. She asked a question like, who says that employees have to be engaged? Why do we, year after year, or in a 10-year cycle, carry out engagement surveys? We get 70%, 80%, and then we start panicking. Oh my God, our staff is unhappy. What is going on in this organization? We start asking leaders, what are you doing? What is your leadership practice? Why don't we change the way that we measure things? So another proposal from her side was, why don't we measure the way people thrive instead of how they are engaged? And do we actually ask our people, how should we measure these statistics in our organizations? For me, it was mind-blowing, because we get stuck in these boxes and we keep doing the same things over and over again. And in organizations, specifically in healthcare, you know, I will be very blunt in here. You go to organizations and you see the same policies and they've been there for 10, 15 years. It is very clear that one policy cannot be applicable, or a procedure or a protocol, for 15 years without a single change. But this is like, we get comfortable, we get stuck in the box, and then also the autopilot mode comes. We are too busy to do anything, so we continue engaging in the practices, some practices that even though they are not serving us, we get frustrated with the results, we still continue doing them.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes we are afraid to actually shake the system and make a move, because we're afraid of the responses that we may get, and we'll be like, we don't know. So I think sometimes when we should advocate to have those questions asked that will shake the boat, and that will come back to us, that we really need to go and dig deep and find the solutions that will be sustainable for our people.
But I think, you know, the other side of that, and I agree with every word you said, ladies, but just the other side for interest, you know, the CEOs and the leadership teams are under so much pressure today. You know, they are under so much pressure. I read data today that said that male CEOs in the USA, year on year, there has been a 48% increase year on year of male CEOs resigning from their positions.
Absolutely.
It's a lot, right? So I of course, I endorse every word you said. And absolutely, we should relook measurement, and we should relook job titles, and we should relook how we build flexibility and well-being and all of these things. But I also, in my work, meet with so many CEOs and leaders that have all the intentions and just none of the time, you know, and it's really, I think it's really tough. I think it's a really tough time of life to be a CEO or anybody in leadership. The data around HR is also unbelievable, you know, how much pressure there is and how much of an increasing gap there is between C-suite HR specialists or people specialists and the leadership teams, like the actual CEOs themselves. So I do think there is a huge amount to be done. But I also think it's very challenging for our leadership teams to do that, because they are working under such intense situations. They're still demanded of double-digit growth every year. And the question is, when will that end? Like, when is single-digit growth just okay, right? So, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. There is so much more we could be measuring and innovating and refreshing for the human beings and the people that are on our work teams today. But we just have to find the leaders that have got the time and energy to think about it, right? And here's to more of them coming through.
Yeah, I recall our discussion from last week. Nina said, we say it is lonely at the top, right? When you get to the leadership position, we know that you have to sometimes make very challenging decisions, right? Do I support my staff, or do I make a decision that is going to support the business growth? And how do you find the balance? And how do you find the time, right? If we sit in this mindset there is not enough time, then we're going to stay there. And I think the continuous going on the autopilot mode, which brings me to the next question, is how do we allow ourselves time to stop, to come to a pause, to ask a question, what do we need to do next? Instead of continuing saying that I don't have time, so I'm stressed, and then I hit the burnout, and then I leave the profession and I go doing something else.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I think a lot of that is around what I would call self-empathy. So that understanding of yourself. One of the things that I hear a lot when it comes to burnout is either from the person that burnt out or the colleagues around them, is they will say it happened so quickly. When, of course, it didn't actually happen quickly. You know, it happened over an extended period of time. But we have so little self-awareness, and that's not a criticism, it's just a reality, that we don't see it coming. We're so out of touch with our bodies and our needs and how much sleep we should be having and what it feels like to be in different states. And that is, of course, a reflection of the world that we're living in. And like you said, that kind of that stress and that churn and that turmoil that we're existing in, especially in urban environments. So, I mean, I think the only way to solve for that is to work out in your own reality what a break looks like to you and how you fit that in. And you have to prioritize it. You have to have boundaries. Having said that, if I'm going to be a little bit controversial, I think as a female entrepreneur, and I fit in that bucket of female entrepreneur advice that's out there, the media is constantly telling me, I should have boundaries. I should say no. I should not turn up. I should protect my value and protect my worth and all of these things, right? And it's all it's good intentioned media. They are trying to get to, Magda, where you were saying, which is setting your boundaries and staying healthy. But I also feel that there's a reverse of that, that if we constantly say no and we constantly put up barriers, because that's what the media is telling us to do, we're actually fueling the problems that we started this conversation about around disconnection. So I have another way of doing that. For me, I am, at least from a traits point of view, an extrovert. I love to be with people. It's a funny thing because I'm not actually that great at being left in a room of people, like at an event. But from like what drives me, I'm an extrovert. I know that I have to be surrounded by people. So if I said no to everything, then I would burn out.
Yeah.
For me, I have to say yes. I say yes, case in point tonight, to everything, right? If anybody's interested in my work or my opinion or anything, I'll just come and do it. And I believe, ladies, honestly, I believe that the more you say yes to, the more you create time. And you touched on this earlier, Magda. You said, you know, if we keep sort of telling ourselves we've got no time, it will become of us. I have the reverse of that psychology. I believe that the more time you want to have, the more time you will create.
Yes.
And that's very empowering, but it does take a conscious mindset shift, because that subjective reality of I don't have any time is in your subconscious mind. But of course, your conscious mind is what fuels your subconscious mind. So there is a very clear delineation and self-empathy for yourself to know, what do I need to not run out of energy, and how do I put that into my schedule?
I love that you mentioned that, Mimi, because I have recently added to my schedule a 30-minute, it's just 30 minutes and it's highlighted in pink and it's called Mental Reboot. Now, on that mental reboot, I do not allow anyone to knock my door or call my phone, so that, you know, I can create that space where I take a deep breath, because like you, I'm a people person. Like I love having one-on-ones with my staff. I love just walking around, talking to people, listening to them and so on. And this is what really fuels me. And I come to my office, I'm like, wow, this is amazing, you know? But as you said, you have to have a balance as well. So that mental reboot in pink has now been like widely known in my teams. Like, don't bother her. She just needs to breathe and she'll come back.
Yeah, it's true.
I think everything is about balance, right? We cannot just go into one extreme and saying no to everything, or no one comes to my office, no one knocks the door. We know that if we get rigid with one idea, it causes toxicity for ourselves and our people. So that finding this balance and something that works for us, I think, is a way forward. And Mimi, as you said, it's not just one decision. We need to practice it, and practice it consciously. So when we take that decision, what is my conscious decision? Is it me making this decision, or am I being pressured by social media and all the slogans that are saying that female entrepreneurs, they have to work 200% to prove themselves, to be better than, you know, male entrepreneurs and something, and along these ways. And also in the 6-second report on the state of heart, there is also additional finding that says that women are leading the post-COVID comeback. Starting in 2021, most of women's emotional intelligence and life success factor scores rebounded in a significant way, even as men's continued multi-year decline. While lagging well-being is a cause of concern, the overall trend for women is positive.
Oh, that's nice.
So it really backs up about the male CEOs, right? People who are really in tough positions, making tough decisions, living in realities when perhaps they think that there is not enough time. I think then the female come into play with some positive message that, you know, we can do something about it. And even though the data, let's say, can be depressing, if you read report after the report, it's not a nice picture. And whomever I have shared it with, they're like, oh my God, this is sad. But people say this is sad, I see opportunity in there. That's why I am so excited to make empathy trendy again, to give people the opportunity to ask questions, curious questions, how I can address it on a personal level, and how this can, I don't know, upgrade me as a human, upgrade me as a leader, how I can serve better my people, my community, and, you know, and the whole ecosystem. I think, yeah, this is, for me, it's a positive conversation, even though we are bringing a lot of challenging points and some concerning data.
Yeah, I agree, Magda. There's huge amounts of potential in both of the areas you were touching on, whether it's empathy for others. So it's really teaching people, and it really is a teaching skill, as how to listen. We don't teach it in schools. We don't teach it in medical school, universities, and until recently, we didn't teach it in the workplace. And, you know, you'll find on LinkedIn and on all of these platforms, endless posts about speaking, how to speak up, how to find your voice, how to speak on stage, how to find your confidence, all of these things. And they're very important. However, not in isolation of teaching the same amount of people how to listen. Because who is going to listen to all of these new people that have found their voice and learn how to speak up, right? We can't solve 100% of the world's problems with only 50% of the skills, right? We have to be able to listen as well as speak. So I think that it's happening, but it needs to happen. It needs to happen, you know, more. And the other thing I would say, and I was inspired by your hope in the negative data, I want to share a little story. Just 2 weeks ago, I was in South Africa doing some community work with very underprivileged, extremely underprivileged environments. And I was with a group of teachers, and I asked them if we could create this empathy that I'm talking about today with you, if we could do this in your community, what would happen? What change would you see? And there was one young woman, African lady in the audience, And I remember her very well because she had bright pink on. And she was young, and I could see she wanted to speak. I could see it in her eyes, but she was not going to, right? So I caught her eye and I said, tell me what you're thinking. And she was very shy and she looked around and then she said, I think if we had more empathy, we might smile more.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, I'm going home, right? That's my, like, sometimes, ladies, we have to remember what life is all about, right? And yes, there's monumental change that we can make, and changing of systems and policies and leadership structures. But we could also just smile more. You know, we could also just genuinely feel better as humans in the environments we're in. And that for me is I don't know, the hope in simplicity.
Oh my God. And you know, the best solutions are the simplest solutions. Whatever we have mentioned here today does not require any money.
Yes.
Any resources. You just need to smile, ask a curious question instead of putting a label or making assumption. So here, as we are nearly at an hour in our life, I will actually give my final message. This is a story. I was a newly qualified nurse in the UK. I remember myself, blue uniform. I took my medication trolley and I'm assigned in bay 1. It was a 6-bedded male bay. I go in the morning after I took my handover. I stood at the door and I said, good morning. So the 6 patients, okay, 3 on each side, they're looking at me. I entered the room and one of the gentlemen on the right side said to me, nurse, smile. It will make us feel better.
Wow.
Stays with me. It's like 15 years ago, you know, and I keep reliving this story and keep telling this story, you know. Just one smile can make someone feel so much better. And to receive it at the beginning of my career, it was like, wow, you know, and I was not a very smiley person, okay? I did not recognize, maybe I was not self-aware, as Mimi said. We need to have self-awareness to change our behavior. So after I received this feedback, I was, let's say, consciously putting a forced smile, till this forced smile became natural of my being. Wow, thank you for reminding me of this, Mimi. This is amazing.
Yeah, right. I know we're going to get to the very end and I'm watching the clock, but just I really want to add on your story because it's, again, now we're talking about these things. In the same trip in Africa just recently, I was in a laundry shop taking my laundry to get done. And the woman that was taking the laundry from people was just on a machine, you know, what's your name? Come back on Wednesday. Like no engagement, no smiling, no nothing, right? And as I came in, her phone rang. So she sort of just said, oh, I'll be with you in a minute, right? And I said, okay, fine, no problem. Like smiled at her. I waited till she finished phone. I come around, she looks up, she says, what's your name? I say, Mimi. And she writes down. I said, what's yours? And she went, and then she had this huge smile. And she said, well, my name's Christine. And I said, well, Christine, nice to meet you. We started a conversation and she said, do you know what? She said, I've been doing this job for 20 years. I don't think anybody ever asked my name. I mean, how amazing is that? Absolutely. Right? That no one has ever asked her name. And it was like her whole face, you know, lit up in joy. So to your point around smiling to your patients, you know, ask people their name, ask them how they are and don't walk away. Just those small moments, right? It makes such a difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely, guys. And Mimi, just remembering when you started, you said that empathy, we have to know the basic meaning of empathy. And that is so true. And the basic of that smile that you guys are talking about is how simple things can make major influence and difference in people's life. And I'm so happy today that we have managed to maybe influence a small percentage of audience, but the fact that we are having this conversation is going to be so amazing. And I think it's monumental. And I am so glad I was part of it.
Me too.
Amazing. So I hope everyone can understand now how we can make empathy trendy again. For me, this is the biggest leadership flex for 2024 and the most sought after skill in leadership and in personal life. Absolutely. So thank you, Mimi. We are really honored to be here with OG, right? The original guy of empathy. And
no OGs. I'm just so happy to be here. Thank you. I can't actually, no, I don't know if I can sleep. I'm smiling so much. It actually aches. My face aches from smiling so much. So that's how much I enjoyed it. So thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Mimi. And next week, same time, May 14th, we are here for another empowering discussion with Danielle Smelcher. She's the founder of Awarely Embodied Leadership, an advocate for trauma-informed leadership and progressive workplace well-being. Progressive is the way. So our conversations are empowering, progressive, and we give a lot of positive energy. Even if you don't like what we are saying, you're going to get a dose of really positive energy in here, guys. So thank you very much for whoever has attended. If you have any comments, you can connect with me via private message. And please come back to our sessions, share feedback, and invite whomever you think might benefit from these discussions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.